to episode 4 of the Schlick Show. I'm Noah Schlicks up here bringing you today's action. We got a great show for you. Scott Kornberg joined the show to talk about the jumbo shrimp, some exciting young prospects we might see at 121 Financial Ballpark this year and how they're preparing for opening day next week. And then Brent Martineau on the show for the first time to talk about the Jaguars' upcoming draft coming up tomorrow. We got a great show for you. Let's get right to it. First up, we get into the Cat's Corner with Brent Martineau. We talk about the upcoming draft for the Jaguars, the possibility of trading up for Kyle Pitts, and a few other players they should target and where they should go after them. Without further ado, here it is. Well, thank you for taking the time to do this. I know you're probably busy, especially with the game today as well. So you want to get into it?
Let's do it.
All right. So with the draft coming up here on Thursday, the Jaguars had a good free agency, but there's still some holes that they need to fix. What are a few of those positions or players that you really think the Jags should go after, and where do you think they should take them?
Yeah, I think everything starts for the Jags around 25, right? Because we know that they're taking Trevor Lawrence, quarterback being number one, but that's an easy fix. We got that one solved way before the draft. But 25 is really interesting. I did a couple mock drafts today just to see how players could fall. And tight end is the most obvious need, but with the depth of the draft, I don't know if it's there to take at 25, even 33, depending on how they feel about Freiermuth or even a Brevin Jordan or some of these other guys. But if they don't get one of them, then they might not get anything. And you have to walk away from this draft with a tight end. If there's a player that they reach for in the draft, it would probably be that position, tight end. But I think it comes at 33 or 45. And they just won't take the chance that they slip even further down the road. Defensive tackle, big need. Safety is a need. I don't think it's as big as other people do, but it's there, especially if a Trevon Merrick or somebody like that is there for them at 25. So they'll have a real chance to say, hey, we could use even a receiver, right? Kadarius Toney or somebody like that. They could pick from 4 different positions. So they have an opportunity to probably take the best player available or look at how deep a position is. I don't think they'll go receiver because they'll say, hey, we can get another receiver in the second round, even the third round. There's a lot of good receivers. They might be kind of pushed to take defensive tackle because there's only 2 or 3 of those guys that are pretty good. So just depends the way they think, but you keep hearing Trent Baalke say value, value, value. I think they'll value big guys especially, and that means defensive tackle.
Yeah, and Christian Barmore is an interesting example of that where you might want to reach from at 25. But I know we talked about this on your show, and you had not been a huge fan of this, but are you still pro not going after trading up for Kyle Pitts?
Yeah, listen, I love the idea of it. If I'm sitting on TV on Thursday night and all of a sudden the Jags rock again because they made a trade, I mean, we'll be going nuts, right? I mean, Jacksonville will be going crazy. I just don't think they can give up enough, or they want to give up enough. They'll be willing up enough to move up to where they have to get Kyle Pitts. If he were to slip outside the top 10, but I mean, I wouldn't put any money on the fact that he's going to slip outside the top 10. So what would it cost to get up to number 4? I did a little bit of this, and I think, I'm not even sure this would still be enough, but I did from the draft value chart, they could give up 25, 33, and 45. So would that be worth the 2 second rounders and the other first rounder to go get Kyle Pitts? I think it would be exciting on the night of the draft. I think if you ask a lot of draft experts, GMs, people around the league, they'd say you're crazy. You get 3 players instead of a tight end. I'd go for the 3 players instead.
Yeah, and that is interesting. But you think about the depth of the Jags as well, and with they weren't really able to go out and get a tight end in free agency, so that's a big hole for them. And when you see a guy like Kyle Pitts, who is a generational talent, it's looking like Darren Waller type, you know, you have to think there's something going on there when it didn't really seem like they were making too much of a push for those guys in free agency.
Yeah, but here's the deal. We got to admit this to ourselves. They have to admit it to themselves. Did they just miscalculate? Were they not able to get Jonnu Smith or Hunter Henry? One, because they didn't offer enough money, and maybe they got outbid and they miscalculated the market. That's certainly plausible. And nobody's going to admit that down there, but that's plausible. And then the other thing is, and we saw this, Albert Breer wrote a column with Shad Khan over the weekend in Sports Illustrated. And Shad said, the owner of the Jacksonville Jaguars said, hey, there's some people who didn't want to come here because Urban Meyer's the head coach. There's a lot of people that didn't want to come, but it wasn't just about money. So if that's the case, maybe they offered a good amount of money, but some of those players didn't want to play for Urban for whatever fit. Maybe there was so much curiosity, question about the college leap. Maybe they had heard things about playing for Urban. Who knows? You just don't know what's behind the scenes. But they didn't get anybody in the tight end world, obviously, in free agency. And now they're stuck a bit because it's just not a great draft class for tight end. And if they don't get Freiermuth, Jordan, I'd put Hunter Long maybe in this category. I see him climbing a lot, and there's a lot of people saying good things about him, even though, quite frankly, I don't know that much about him. If they don't get one of those three guys, you really feel like they failed at the position this offseason. But keep in mind now, you can't fix everything in one offseason. And there's a lot of folks that I've talked to that say, listen, everybody's talking tight end. Well, just go put another receiver on the field, instead of that package that you have tight end. You'd love to be able to get the Kelsey, the Kittle, the Waller kind of matchup. But you can't force it either. If you don't have it, you go try to do something else on offense.
So what do the Jaguars really need to do in this draft for you to consider it successful?
They just need not to trip or have the phone connection go out getting to Trevor Lawrence and that number one pick. But outside of that, I think they have to walk away here. If you look at positions that we would all say have need, we talked about earlier, defensive tackle, safety, tight end, and probably looking down the road at offensive line. So I would say if they don't walk away with 3 out of 4 of those kind of positions somewhere along the first 6 picks of this draft, then we'd probably criticize a little bit. All right, did they do enough? You could throw edge rusher in there. You could throw third down back in there. And so if I continue to throw different positions in there, you're going to run out of picks or you're going to force picks sooner or later. So they can't fix everything. That's why I put receiver on the back burner. They have enough of those. They're okay there. You could always get better. And every receiver somebody throws out to me, Kadarius Toney, Rondale Moore, you name it, I say, will he change the offense? Because that's what they have to ask themselves. If I'm going to get another receiver, does he change the way we look, we are defended, we can move on offense? If there's not an answer to that, and you're just getting another good receiver to be on the depth chart, then I'd say forget about the wide receiver. I think third down back's an important one, probably an overlooked one right now, because you can't just sit here and say, hey, James Robinson's going to do exactly what he did last year. I think that's a little pie in the sky. He had an unbelievable year. You hope he does. But you better have a backup plan because they had no backup last year to James Robinson. So, and I think they're fine at safety if they wanted to, if they don't get Merrick or somebody like that. Jared Wilson's a fine player. He's not a great player. He's a fine player. So they won't fix anything, but you take those 3, 4, 5 positions I just mentioned, you better be able to check the box on 3 of them and say, we got better here.
Thanks, Brent, for joining the show. Next up, we dive into the shrimp tank with Scott Kornberg as he talks about how the Jumbo Shrimp are preparing for opening day next week and a few exciting young prospects who we could be seeing in Jacksonville and could be MLB stars in the future. So, opening day is coming up next week. I'm sure you guys excited for that as you haven't had a game in over a year and a half now. And so it's coming up next week. I know I'd seen that the alternate camp's on shutdown right now. So how are you guys working through that and preparing for opening day?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me on, and we're so excited that opening day is May 4th at 7:05 p.m., and that is, as you said, the first baseball in over a year and the first baseball in nearly 2 years, because the last time the Jumbo Shrimp played here was in August of 2019, so it's going to be about 20 months or so, if my math is correct on that. And we're really just, A, looking forward to having baseball, and B, doing it safely. And so we were maybe hoping that fans could be here to see some of the split squad games or inter-squad games during the alternate training site. But unfortunately, like, some of the players are still in kind of that vaccine mode to get that all taken care of. And so they just want to take extra precautions with that as they make sure those guys are inoculated. But we are really looking forward to doing things safely beginning on May 4th. And so we're going to have limited distance seating, about 45% for our capacity. We're going to have a mask policy in which all fans have to wear a mask, similar to the Jaguars, unless you're actively eating or drinking. And we're going to have all sorts of like hand sanitizing stations, among other things. Those are obviously the big things that people analyze. And it's really great because we're coming back for the first time in baseball in more than a year as a AAA team. So for the first time since 1968, Jacksonville will field the AAA team, which is minor league baseball, as you know, Noah, their highest level, and obviously doing so while continuing our long-standing partnership with the Marlins that dates back to 2009. So we'll be seeing some of the best prospects continuing to come up the ladder to the major leagues, and also major league guys coming down and rehabbing down here from injuries as well. So it's just really the best of all worlds in that regard.
Yeah, and it sure has been a long time coming for you guys, but it's kind of it's huge season for you guys, as you know, you mentioned that move to AAA. You got a ton of prospects coming, and I mean, I was here for the alternate training camp. I had come a couple days, kind of looked through the gates, and you know, you guys got some of the top prospects up there. I'd seen Max Meyer had been up a little bit, JJ Bleday, and Sixto, of course, rehabbing. So those guys, a few, Sixto, Jazz Chisholm, a few guys to come up through the minor leagues and are now having success at the MLB. But who are a few of the guys that we might see spend some significant time in Jacksonville this year that could be future stars?
Yeah, and you mentioned like Jazz Chisholm is a perfect example of someone who's gone up and he's thrived in the major leagues. And we don't have the roster quite yet for the Marlins, so we don't know for sure who will be with us on opening day. But, you know, I think from our perspective, we would love to see, you know, some old friends like a George Guzman or an Edward Cabrera, two guys who are really bigger prospects who pitched with us in 2019. And then, like you said, J.J. Bleday is a highly talented outfielder who could be really interesting to see come to Jacksonville in 2021. And he's a guy who led the nation in home runs his last year at Vanderbilt. There's also some guys who are, you know, maybe it didn't work out the first time in the major leagues, like a Monte Harrison or Isan Diaz. And, you know, I would think that, or even Lewis Brinson potentially, I would think those guys have a shot to play at some point in Jacksonville in 2021. And I think the nice thing is, you know, you mentioned Max Meyer, and he's an interesting case because how quickly do the Marlins push him? But they have a top 5 farm system by every stretch of the imagination, really, no matter what outlet you use, whether it be it's the Athletic or Baseball America or MLB Pipeline. And so the question is, does Sixto Sanchez come here with his injury rehab? You know, obviously, pretty good chance. We don't know for sure. Edward Cabrera, it's the same thing. But then there's other guys, J.J. Bleday and Lewin Diaz, and these guys have a chance to contribute to the Marlins in the very near future and just need some polishing around the edges. I mean, that's what we're here for. That's why AAA exists. And so I think that really when you look at any like Marlins top prospects list, most of those guys are going to have a chance to play with us at some point in 2021, and we just don't know who quite yet, but we can obviously do some guesstimation, and I think a lot of those guys that have either had short stays in the major leagues, they have a chance to come down and just polish up their game, and we'll see the rapid risers like Cabrera and Bleday and Diaz as they get closer and closer to the major leagues.
Thank you, Scott, for joining the show. It's always great having him on. And that will do it for our show here today. Thank you all for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.